Welcome to this edition of Chakmah Choter on the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We had quite the program last night as we talked about the consequence of what is transpiring around the world in terms of the raging roar of anti-Semitism. And it has become a crescendo between Marxists and Muslims as they band together to attack God's people. I spoke briefly this morning as we were discussing the prophetic proof texts that demonstrate that Israel is going to be dissected at the waist, having to forfeit her heartland to appease the Marxist Muslim agenda and carve out land which she has too little of. For the Marxist Muslims that are striving to annihilate them, who have just recently raped, terrorized, mutilated, and abducted Jews, that this will be carved out of Israel as a reward to appease the Muslims who nobody else in the world wants. But after killing, brutalizing Jews, they're going to be given a country of their own. Can you imagine how horrible that is going to be? And what I talked about briefly this morning in our earlier show is that the whole idea of Palestine is nothing more than a racial slur. Its conception dates back to 133 CE, when Emperor Hadrian, who was amongst the worst people who ever lived, I would say he's easily in the top 5 most hated people of all time by God, was in the province of Judea, massacring Jews, torturing them, starving them, mutilating them, crucifying them by the hundreds of thousands, and hauling many away for the diaspora as slaves. He was just a ruthless son of a bitch. He enjoyed burning Jews alive by wrapping Torah and prophetic texts around them, soaked in oils, and lighting them on fire. And as he was torturing them, he was looking for a slur that he could use to torment those he was killing and abusing and torturing. And he heard that there had once been a invading force known as the Philistines that had been so ruthless that they couldn't even be enslaved, that every nation that encountered them, from the Israelites, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and the Macedonians, found that there was no way to enslave them. They were so barbaric that they were annihilated. The last Philistine was killed by Alexander the Great on his way to Egypt in the 3rd century BCE. That was it. No more of them. So Hadrian was fully aware that they didn't exist anymore, but so much the better to torment Jews. And so he said, I'm going to rename the province of Yehuda, Judah, God's name for it, Philistia, just to piss him off. It's a racial slur. And after doing so, he hightailed it to Greece, where he officiated over the Dionysian mystery cult celebration of what became Easter week. I share this with you just so that you might know that Hadrian, like most Romans, metastasized into the Roman Catholic Church. There really isn't much to distinguish as one from the other. Equally disgusting, he's equally beastly, equally in opposition to God. And all the while he hauled his little boy toy along with him. He had a child that he liked to have sex with. He was a homosexual, which I don't care if he's, green and likes to do it with toads. But the fact is, he was a pedophile, homosexual pedophile. I guess that's perfect for what became the Roman Catholic Church, isn't it? So this name shouldn't have had any longevity. It should have died off with Hadrian. It was nothing but a racial slur. It's like using the N word. It's repulsive. It was to victimize the victims. But sadly, Hadrian found an audience that was equally anti-Semitic, the British. And rather than returning to the actual name of the land, Judea, Yahudah, which means beloved of Yah, it's a compound of Yahweh's name and Dod's name, Yahweh's beloved. The Brits, being disgusting anti-Semites, and very much in having very much in common with the Romans in terms of their desire to occupy, subjugate, persecute foreign lands, decided they would use that racial slur and called it Palestine. So when Israel was reestablished following the Holocaust, and it was only reestablished after the Holocaust because Muslims prevented the establishment of a Jewish state prior to then, because they wanted the Nazis to exterminate Jews as opposed to exile them. That was the request and ploy of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem when he met with Hitler and changed the Nazi program from exile to extermination. When Israel finally, after the attempted genocide against God's people in Roman Catholic Europe, they, through miraculous performance and odds, the fledgling new Jewish state beat the assembled and aggregate of Muslim nations, assaulting it in the 1948 War of Independence. And then when all these Muslim nations decided they would attack Israel again in 1967, Jews won again. And this time they took over much of the Sinai and much of Syria, Jordan. And the Muslims realized, well, we're not doing very well here trying to beat them militarily. Let's try a different tactic. And because the Russians were the ones that were selling most of the arms to the Muslims, and this was the time of communist Russia, the Soviet Union, the KGB met with the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo, and this Marxist Muslim alliance decided they would rename the Muslims from Jordan and from Egypt that were in Israel Palestinians, resurrecting the racial slur of Hadrian. And they did so as a terrorist tactic to inflict intifada, violent uprising against Jews. The purpose was genocide of Jews and the obliteration of Israel. That is all Palestine represents. It is not a nation. It is not an ethnicity. It is a racial slur designed to perpetrate genocide. And yet it was under this racial slur, Free Palestine, that blood flowed in Washington, D.C. with the murder of the two Israeli embassy workers at the hand of a Marxist, too foul, too ignorant, too immoral, too irrational to have even thought through the history of that myth. And unfortunately, the world is filled with disgusting people, and they have a new home. It's called X, where perpetrating all manner of hatred against Jews is highly rewarded. You can have millions of followers if you become a raging anti-Semite. X is complicit in the bloodletting among Jews. It's a horrible experience. It's a horrible situation, but that is what we're fighting, and that is the purpose of the role that I've been asked to play, is to expose and condemn those trying to harm God's people, to stand in their way, to despise them because they are wrong, because they are perpetrating a deadly scheme to victimize the victims, and because God cares for his people and he wants them spared for this. And so I stand between the Marxist Muslim alliance and Jews and Israel. It's part of the job. Now, the second statement that Solomon presented pursuant to the Nacri, which he introduced in the previous declaration, reads as follows. Now, this is from the actual Sermon on the Mount. This was given the 7th year past year 3000 Yah. Year 3000 Yah was when the cornerstone of Yahweh's home was laid in 968 BCE, 4 years after Dode's initial passing. At the same time that Yahweh revealed the 89th Mizmor, which is the most glorious song ever written about Dode and all the things that Dode represents, the very fact that Dode is the Messiah, the Son of God, the returning King of Israel, which means that Jesus Christ is nothing but a myth, a crude counterfeit of Dode. Jesus never existed. Dode did. And God's people, rabbis, plastered over the lie twice over because Paul was a rabbi and he is the one who created the myth of Jesus and the Christian New Testament. And Rabbi Akiba, rather than excoriating Paul for what he had done and for the lies that he was perpetrating, since it's so obvious that it is Dode who came in 33 CE to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and that it was Dode who told us that he would be crucified by Rome in the fulfillment of Passover. And because the rabbis did not figure this out, rather than shaming the Christians and destroying the religion before it even got started, what we find is that they brought a second false Messiah in the world with Bar Kokhba, from which Israel gets its star. He was the son of a star, and it is what caused the Hadrian to come in to Judea to start the diaspora and to rename the land, which is what is causing the very conflict that is ultimately going to be so caustic to Israel now. So this is what Solomon said. When you hear this coming out of the heavens, I'll recognize that we're bringing this program to you as a live stream. It is being sent from here via a satellite dish on my roof to a Starlink satellite, and then back down to wherever you are via satellite. It is coming literally out of the heavens. And I think my friend Wookie wants down, so we're going to accommodate him now. So when you hear this coming out of the heavens, listen to what comes from the spiritual realm. Within the location where you live, no matter where you live, then engage and act accordingly, doing everything which to show the way the Nacri, this observant foreigner and responsive man from a different ethnicity and geographic location who understands, has proclaimed. and has invited you to read, summoning you for the express purpose of serving as a witness and as a teacher who provides answers such that all the people of the earth will have a genuine and ongoing opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, to acknowledge, to accept, and to understand your marvelous name. Coming to respect and revere what pertains to you, speaking of Yahweh, simultaneously along with your people, Israel, and so that they may know, acknowledge, and accept, and appreciate Yada, because truthfully, for your name, he is designated and called, invited, proclaimed, and welcomed. Concerning this house and family, which to reveal the way to get the correct path to walk, to give meaning to life, I have built. So this is a very powerful message. It's one of the most important prophecies of our time. It's God being exceedingly detailed and deliberate, forthright, telling Israel that a time has now come when a voice will come out of the heavens, which wasn't possible until, well, the last 5 years. And no matter where you live, so this voice comes to you no matter where you live on earth. Again, something that wasn't possible until just recently, with not only smartphones, and there's 8 billion of them, and it also requires this satellite distribution of internet, where no matter where you are in the world, you can receive this live stream. And so God's saying that when you hear it, then do exactly what his Nakri is asking. Engage, act, extend the energy to benefit, because he's showing the way to capitalize on this relationship. He is the Nakri, the observant and responsive foreigner, of which no one else has ever identified. No one else could have been this individual, because no one else has ever made a statement or an announcement pertaining to him. You can't be the person if you don't even know you are the person. And there's no other person on earth who is claiming this title, even now. And we are absolutely running out of time because, well, there's only 8.5 years left. And can you see the books that sit behind me and what we have done these last 24 years to prepare for this moment? You know, God's not going to say, I want you to listen to this person and do everything that he asks and engage that way. And I want you to read what he has written if you don't have a wealth of books like this. And these books are based upon amplified translations, not only of Yahweh's testimony, but corrected to reflect the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then commentary on them so you can understand what God is saying, and so that it's relevant to you today. That's the reason why you can act, because I've not only shared what God said, but explained it in a way that you can respond to the message that God has delivered, so that you know what the conditions are of the covenant. No one previously had ever explained them. So that you know the purpose of each of the 7 Moed Mikre and how they enable the benefits of the covenant, which no one had ever done before. So that you know the timeline and what has happened where and when, and what's going to happen as we move through these next 8.5 years before Dod's return with Yahowah. So that you know who you are relying upon to receive these benefits. Dod, David. So that you know God's name, because this is insistent that this individual is the one who had enough respect for God's name to reintroduce it to his people. There's only one person in all of human history that fits this particular narrative, and you're listening to him. And there's no doubt about that. And God just told you to engage and act accordingly, to do what he says. And what I'm saying is come to know and act upon the 5 conditions of the covenant, which require you to walk away from religion and politics, from the intermixing and commingling that confuses by intermixing fact and fiction, which is the marvelous definition of the Christian New Testament, of the Zohar, of the Talmud, and of course the Quran. Walk away from that. Work away from Babel, what God says. And in this case, Babel. I'm not so sure that's going to work, Leah. He's a little wild. Babel is the same word as we find in Bible. Babel and Bible, same word in Hebrew, means to commingle, to confuse. This is what God is asking us to leave. So that's the first condition of the covenant. The second is to walk to Yahweh and become perfect. And the only way to do that is through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And no one celebrates, even acknowledge what matzah was until I reintroduced it, that it's the core ingredient in becoming perfected. It's when Dode, soul, carried our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there so we would be perfect in front of God. This is the way that these things are accomplished. And the third condition is to trust and rely upon Yahweh, not your religion, not your political party, not your military, on Yahweh. Then it says, closely examine and carefully consider the terms of this covenant relationship, of which prior to these books, no one had ever done. And then it says that as a man, you must be circumcised if you're going to capitalize on Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim and become part of the covenant family. And as parents, it's your responsibility to circumcise your sons on the 8th day so that they and you remember this covenant that God has established with us. These are the conditions of the covenant. You need to act upon them. You need to respond to Yahweh's invitations to join him 7 times a year to celebrate the Moed Mikra. Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. And you need to know what they mean, what they represent, when they are to be observed, what you gain from them, what God is offering through them, who fulfilled them, and who will fulfill them going forward. You need to accept the realization that it is this Nakri, through close observation, the one that reintroduced the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name, reintroducing Yahweh to his people, and that you need to start cherishing his name. You need to understand that it is his son, David, who is the actual Messiah, the Son of God, the returning king, and not that reprehensible myth of Jesus. These are the kind of things that the Nakri is asking of you, and God is telling you to do what he says. I'm also the one who has invited you to read and recite and have 35 books all freely offered. Don't charge you anything. Don't even ask for your email. You come in, we don't even track you. We have no idea who is visiting the site. Don't much care. You are free to come and go without any interference and read every page of every book. All 35 of them. They're all for free. You can even buy them royalty free if you want to have a softback paperback from Amazon. Fair warning, they're big. The average book is about 650 pages. They go up to 825. No one else is offering that. And that's what this says, that he has invited you to read. Kara, summoning you. And it's for the express purpose of him serving as a witness. He is a teacher providing answers for everyone on earth, which is only possible now. And only for someone who recognizes that Torah means teaching, so you can be a teacher once you're taught, once you receive God's directions. And this specifically says that they understand your name. I'm the first person to do that. And at least 2,500 years. It shouldn't have been that way, but it has been. God's people have deliberately, knowingly, purposefully erased God's name from his own witness and from their lives. And they'll never have any reaction, any interaction with God until they resolve that. Which is why we lead with it. It's why the books are called Yada Yahowah. It's why the website is yadayah.com. Yada means to know. Yah is the familiar form of God's name. And then God goes so far as to name this individual. He is Yada. It means to know, to recognize, to acknowledge, to understand. And asking you, if you're listening, come to respect what he is saying pursuant to Yahowah. And do so simultaneously, because he is doing so simultaneously with Yisrael. And also so they may know, so they may acknowledge and accept, even appreciate Yada. Because truthfully, for your name, he is designated and called, invited and welcomed. You know, what's so interesting about this is that the building that is called the temple by Jews and even by Christians, the temple, well, when it's described here as it was completed, it's not called a temple. It's called a Bayeth, which is a home of the Shem name of Yahowah. Bet you didn't know that, but that's what it's called. The home of Yahowah's name. And here is this daiquiri sharing that with you and telling you that God's name is Yahowah. You know, we even now have a Facebook group called Yada Yahowah. It started this week. And the website is Yada Yah or Yada Yahowah, either one.com. We serve the house and family of God. Now, whether you are a Yehudim, a Yisraelite, or a Goyim, and no matter men, makom, yashab, ata, where you live, so that you are properly established in your life and endure, Yahowah is instructing you to asha, ka, kol, act and engage, doing everything his designee, this ha-nakri, the observant foreigner, has proclaimed and read aloud. I'm reciting these translations to you now. That's the purpose of this program. And I have written them so you can read them and recite them. We're soon going to have an updated website that is a page turner where you can pick your book, take it off the shelf, if you will, and open it as if you were holding it in your hand and turn each page. And at times it will even speak to you. And at times it'll play a video that explains as we're doing these programs on that section. A marvelous technology that brings them right into your lap. No matter where you are in the world, instantly, freely, at your own beck and call. It's extraordinary. Now, it's interesting that in Yeshayah and every place else, this individual that Solomon is calling the Nakri is called the Nakar. The only difference in the two is the concluding yod, the Y. And the yod speaks of the very hand of God or the influence of this person. So it says that here it would say that the observant foreigner is responsive and therefore influential. But it's more than that. Because when you see the yod, yod at the end of a word like this, when it's a title, it would be like so many others in Hebrew, where it means my observant foreigner. It's a contraction of ani, which is me, myself, and I. And so it would be my observant foreigner. Oh, that means that the nakar, yada, the final zeroah, belongs to Yahweh. He is a tool, an implement that Yahweh is deploying. It's not demeaning to say you're a tool or implement of God. It's a distinction. It's an honor. Nothing better to be wielded by Yahweh, the creator God of the universe. But Nakri is distinguished from Nakar by the Yod, which makes the Nakar, in this case, a Nakri, which is my observant foreigner. And therefore a tool that Yahweh is wielding, which is why Yahweh can say, do everything he says, because it is Yahweh who is making all of this possible. It's why he gave the Choter 7 spirits, including the spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of Chakmah, which is the name of this program, Chakmah Choter. He gave the Choter Chakmah, the spirit of Chakmah, the spirit of Bien, which is understanding, the spirit of Gabor, of boldness, of Etzah, of counsel, such that you can provide the entire picture from beginning to end. Spirit of reverence for Yahweh's name, the spirit of knowledge, so that what I am saying to you is like Yahweh saying, this is my observations that you ought to accept and act upon. It's unlike anything else you read anywhere else in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, unless you're reading about one of the titles that Yahweh has afforded this individual. And the reason that this individual is so enormously important, and he is, from God's point of view, in the big three. Now, that's going to be really, really tough for Jews to swallow, but that's the fact. He's in the big three. You don't even know who the big three are, so maybe it's not so hard for you to swallow. But the big three don't begin with Abraham. Abraham was a knucklehead. Yeah, God loved him because God saw the best in him, and Abraham and Sarah was delightful, but Abraham was a scallywag. He sold Sarah into as if she was somebody he could trade for sheep. He pimped her out twice. Pardon? He human trafficked her. Okay, I don't know what that means, but all right. He's a bad individual. So he's not it. We know very little about Jacob. Noah did his thing and saved his family from the flood that took place in the region where he lived. It's a wonderful story. I love the story. And I love the fact that we can prove it now with the Berkel impact crater and the Yahweh's testimony about upwelling of deep seawater to initiate this process. But it's not Noah. And that would bring us to Moshe. And you understand that Moshe is put on a pedestal by some only because they don't know him very well. And I've had, for the longest time, the utmost respect for Moshe because I recognize that he had tremendous character when he stood up for the Hebrews, the children of Israel, as they were being abused by the Mitzri, the Egyptian taskmasters. And he stood up for them, risked his life to spare them, even though they turned on him and were embittered and unappreciative, just as they responded to God. But I respected that. I respected the fact that he walked away from the cushy life in Egypt, being part of the politics and the religion, and he disrespected those things, and he had the wherewithal to know to leave them and walk away from them. And the first thing we hear about him thereafter is there's some bandits trying to prey on some women that are young ladies that are tending their sheep, trying to water them in the desert. And Moshe, at an older man, stood up for them, risked his life, didn't walk away from the fight. He stood up for them. He had character, and I like that about him. And what the job he was given by Yahweh turned out to be, he was a spectacular individual in the sense that he saw through. He was he took the dictation for Barashith. He lived Shemoth, the names. He lived through Kara. He lived through the events of in the wilderness, Dabadim, or Bad Midbar. And then he gave the oratory that showed that he actually understood what he was talking about, because Dabadim is the summation, an oral summation of the Torah and what it means and how one should apply it to their lives. And he wrestled with these ornery, wayward children for 40 years. A lot of respect for that. I've just, unfortunately, translated Numbers 8 or number 11. And Numbers 11, Moshe had a complete and utter meltdown, and God completely gave up on the children of Israel. And at that point, he says, we're going to go through the paces, Moshe, but your job now is just to get them to the promised land. There's not much we can do with them beyond that. It was a horrible experience. He had a complete and total meltdown. So to be compared to Moshe isn't near the being put on the pedestal that those in religious circles might have put him in. And the fact is that those who were with him during the Exodus treated him like crap. They were so unbelievably mean to Moshe. Rabbis now want to call Moshe a rabbi. Nothing of the sort. But there can be no affinity between Jews today, particularly religious Jews, and Moshe. Jews treated Moshe horribly, and there were no exceptions. It was horrible from the beginning, every one of them. So Moshe is one of the three Zeroah. He's a flawed man that served mightily in an important role. That was delivering Yahweh's Torah teaching and taking the children of Israel from slavery to liberation, to freedom. The greatest of the three, the big three, is the one that the Rabbi Paul and then the Rabbi Akiba both bypassed, that completely and totally ripped off, raided, robbed, raped. It's Dod. Dod is the chosen one. He is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. He is the one whose spirit came upon him and never left. He is the King of Israel and the returning King of Israel. He's the prophet who wrote the Psalms and the Proverbs. He is the greatest defender of Israel. He is the one that created the city of Dod. He is the one that bought the Temple Mount. He's the one that Yahweh loves more than any other. He is the one who volunteered in his second of three lives to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, becoming our Savior. It doesn't get any better than that. Makes him the ideal Zeroah. He's the greatest of men, most brilliant, most articulate. But he's flawed too, so you can't put him on a pedestal. You can't say, oh, well, if you're going to claim to be one of the big three, that puts you in tall cotton. Now, the fact is that I work for Dod. I report to him. He is my superior. I have the utmost respect for him, but I have to announce and be honest that Dod had his flaws. Now, his flaws aren't going to matter anymore because he carried them away and deposited them in Sheol, never to be seen again, on matzah for himself as well as ours for us. But Dode did some dunderhead stuff. Lots of it. In the midst of being extraordinary. And what that says is that God can take ordinary people with some exemplary attributes and accomplish magnificent things when they're willing. Well, the fact is that Dode, being the most important man associated with Yahweh's story, the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, the one who therefore enabled the benefits of the covenant, the one who is the exemplar of the covenant. He is even the exemplar of Yisrael, the good and bad. The chosen one, the one that Yahweh chose to be king, and the one that Yahweh is bringing back to be king of everywhere and forevermore. He is the only way that you get into heaven, because of what he did on Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim. This is not known without the third of these unique men, Yahweh's Nakri. No one would know that Dode served to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. No one would know that there was no Jesus Christ, that's nothing but a crude counterfeit of who Dode actually is. The Messiah and the Son of God, our Savior, who was crucified by the Romans in 33 CE. That does not make Jesus Dode, and it doesn't mean that any part of the Christian New Testament is true. It's all false. But the myth of Jesus was based on robbing Dode and then mixing the resulting Jesus with a whole lot of Dionysus. But no one knows. No one knows the conditions of the covenant. No one knows how the covenant is fulfilled through the Mikra, how to observe the Moed Mikra and capitalize upon them, that it is Dode that we owe this respect to. No one knows the timeline. No one knows that the Shabuah harvest is happening, the Towrah harvest. No one understands the sacrifice of the red heifer, who the adulterous woman is, when Yahweh is returning, who he is returning with, why he is returning, what they're going to accomplish once they return, who is not going to be there at that time. None of it is known. No one even knows God's name. And if none of it's known, no one can capitalize. There is no homecoming. No one recognizes who the actual Messiah and the Son of God is, who our Savior is. No idea of the timeline. Jews are off by almost 250 years because of the lies of Maimonides. And if nobody knows, no one's capitalizing. If no one's capitalizing, there's no homecoming. There is no fulfillment of Shabuah, Towrah, or Kippurim, and therefore there's no return to the Garden of Eden as part of Sukkah. So this role of the Nakri is vital because the story falls flat. There's no reason for God to return. The earth is destroyed, as he says several different times. There's no end to the time of Jacob's troubles. So there you have it. That's why this is so vital. The role of the Nakri, also called the Choter, also called the Nakar, called the Kol of voice of Yahweh, called the Bashar, the herald of the king, called the pay mouth of God, called the Ed and Edah, the restoring witness, the Malach, spiritual messenger, referred to as the Adamah Parah, bloody red man of the earth who is productive, and also the red heifer, called the man from Edom who comes out and saves many, called Yada, the final and third Zeroah. That's who he is. That's why he is important. And so as a result now of this Yahowah blog, you get to hear from him firsthand. Listen to him. Look him in the eye. Evaluate what he is saying. Go to his library at yadayah.com. Validate his translations and his insights for yourself. Read. But, don't have a knee-jerk reaction to say, nah, there's no chance that could be true. Read. Look at the proof. The evidence is overwhelming. I've just read to you something that God said. You want to call God a liar and say there is no Nachri? That he gave you this specific prophecy that is being fulfilled right before you're listening, and you want to say that? Nah, God, he didn't know what he's talking about. You want to say the man who has more insights relative to God and to his son than anyone in human history is wrong? When God said, listen to him, do as he says, read what he's written? I don't think so. God is asking you to respond appropriately to what you hear. He even announced 3,000 years ago that you are in a position to hear his voice, as if it were coming to you out of the heavens, from a cloud, from the satellites, which provide international internet coverage. It is almost as if he were aware that I would be reliant here on Starlink to disseminate our live streaming programs, where I most often recite my translations of his word aloud to you in these programs. Even then, it is not enough for you just to listen. This is not a passive relationship. You're being asked, being invited to become part of God's family, on his terms, of course, but to be part of God's family. And you cannot be part of this family and be a couch potato. You need to participate. You heard that saying, be off to the side, because even though my wife does work 14 hours a day creating content for Yada Yahowah and for the YAHOWAH blog, and she released a beautiful, powerful song just last night. She is sitting over on the couch over with Rich, and now that Rich is here to produce these shows, which Leah was doing and continues to do from time to time, it frees Leah to be a co-host of this program rather than just sit on that couch. And so she's giggling because it is YAHOWAH that is urging her to do this, and she is an introvert, so she's not quite as comfortable in front of the cameras. And I keep on telling her, if you think this is comfortable, I've got 14 studio lights that are trained on me right now. I'm sitting in this chair in front of this Shure microphone. I am looking at a Canon X60 professional camera in the lens. I sat down here and said, go. And here we are. Every show is live. Now, if you think that it's easy, comfortable to sit down in a chair like this and do all of that for over an hour, 2 to 3 times a day, while you're also spending time fighting the battles in social media, where for the most part, it's a horrible experience. And X is a literal hive of anti-Semitism. And then, the highlight, of course, is translating Yah's testimony, which I've just finished Numbers 11, one of the most insightful, powerful, rewarding passages that I've experienced thus far. But this is not easy. We're doing this because in December, even though I hadn't written a word, I hadn't posted a single message in my life on social media, YAHOWAH says, you are now going to be my social media guy. You're going to now have a YAHOWAH blog. You're going to buy cameras and studio lights and all the studio setup and a whole bunch of streaming computers. And you're going to upgrade your internet, and we're going to go to town. We're going to have the YAHOWAH blog. You are going to be a vlogger. I said, well, I'm almost 70 years old. Vloggers are, for the most part, 20-somethings in mom's basement. This is what you want me to do after 23 years of translating and writing and being quiet, and then sharing that experience through the books, and this is what you want? Yep, that's what I want. Okay, sir. That's what we'll do. Yeah, and so you're just sitting there. Okay, now what do I do? What cameras do I buy? Oh, so I said, oh, what the heck? I'll buy like 8 of them, which I did. What lenses do I buy? Well, I bought a bunch of them too. What microphones do I buy? I probably have 20 of them. You know, what kind of lights do I buy? I probably have now 50 of them. What kind of gear do I have to hold all this up? What kind of computers do I buy to stream all this? What service do we use to make all of this possible? Do we dare do everything as a live stream as opposed to record it and edit it and buff it up? How do we get everything to work together and to coordinate? And I live in an island in the middle of the ocean. How do you do all of that? Well, the answer is expensively. And, you do your best. And here we are. I think the resulting product is, well, it's good enough for Yahowah to say, listen to him, read what he's written, and do as he asks. Good enough for God. I suspect it's good enough for you. And it will be nice to have a beautiful Jewish face and voice adding to the chorus of this message. So it's just a matter of time. But even then, according to God, that wasn't enough. Not just to listen. He wants you to respond. The covenant is about being active. This is a relationship. There is nothing worse in a relationship than one person who gives and the other person who takes and does nothing. Unrequited love is the most horrible feeling in the world. Most of us have experienced it at one time or another. That's not what God is offering. He wants you to engage in this relationship with him, which is to act and to be productive. And the thing that he enjoys the most is teaching so that we can learn. And then once we learn, he wants us to share. So you can be assured that Yahowah, 7 Ruach are inspiring the dialogue that we are providing, which is the only way that God can say with confidence, listen to what he is reciting, read what he has written, and act upon what he asks. There would be no other way to do that unless he knows that we are guided by his Spirit and his Torah instructions. Now I realize that had Yahowah not inspired Solomon to profess his request, this would sound preposterous. And that is especially true for Jews who have only afforded this autonomy to rabbis, who I just besmirch. And it's even more difficult from them because God said he would be not of your people, this Yisrael, that he is a Nakri, an observant foreigner. But he is the man from Edom, not the man from Yahud. Now, it's true that even being the man from Edom, I am Jacob's brother. And so there is that correlation. But there's no denying Yahowah's statement. It's all-encompassing. It's unequivocal. It is very detailed. It is irrefutable. And the context is extraordinary, which is why we shared all of it leading up to this point, and we're going to continue to share it as we move through the end of this chapter, the 6th of 2nd Chronicles. And in this particular case, God said, I want you to do everything. Kol means all. That's all means. To benefit from Yahowah's Nakri, his observant foreigner, you must listen to and do everything that is asked of you. And that's a lot. God has very high expectations. And we're here to meet them, to exceed them, to make him proud, to achieve what he wants on behalf of his people. It's not a selfish undertaking. However, we get more out of it than we put into it. That's the nature of working with God. But there is no mistaking the fact that it is laborious. You're going to be asked to contribute a lot. And there are a number of people now in the covenant that do a lot. And I would say they're the most joyous, living the most fulfilling, purposeful lives on the planet. Now, the reason Yahweh could make such a bold and sweeping statement is that he's controlling the action. He still allows free will, but he's influencing it for sure. Before he would have me begin live streaming via the satellites to broadcast the Yahowah blog, we would spend the preceding 23 years translating his words, contemplating his instructions, pondering what he is asking from us and offering in return, all while deducing thousands of insights from his every proclamation. We would write 38 books in total. 30, I think 4 currently on the bookshelf. I'm writing the 35th. It would not be until I came to perceive his entire picture from beginning to end, including the revelation that his son, Dod, is our Messiah and King, and that he fulfilled Chakmah. It's the single greatest discovery pursuant to God in human history. And that we would transition, he and I, from writing so that you could read to speaking so that you could listen. By that time, and with the benefit of his 7 Ruach spirits, Yahweh had every assurance that I would be able to effectively serve as his call voice, such that I would say what he wanted conveyed. As we began just a few days ago, the Yada Yahowah group on Facebook, a number of people began to share their personal story, how they were introduced to Yahweh and began to learn as a result of these books and these programs. And now it fills the page. It's one wonderful story after another, many of them even videotaped, some of them so powerful. It's you don't know if you want to laugh or cry or do both at the same time, because these are just transformational moments and lives that have gone from exceedingly rough circumstances to glorious. As I told one very enthusiastic member of the covenant family who was about as low could be, that we are defined one way or another by our roughest moments, either because we succumb to them or because we overcome them and develop character in the process and confidence as well, which is something he has. And it's just one marvelous story after another. And one of the things that they all say is that over these many years that I've done tens of thousands of radio shows and blogs, and now the Yahowah video blog, that there is a certain tenor to this voice. That there's a passion, there's a depth, there's a resonance, there's an aura of confidence, of assuredness that is exceedingly uncommon. And that's Yahweh speaking to you through me. Now, I will also tell you that by using Kara, which is what Yahweh had Solomon say, it means to summon, to invite, to read and recite, to proclaim, to call out, and to meet and to welcome. It is a word that I've always wondered. It is one of the most important words it's a verb in the Hebrew lexicon. When I had the boat that I cruised to reach this island, I named the vessel Kara, which means to provide a welcoming invitation. And it is the basis of Mikra, and in the plural Mikre, which define the 7 annual meetings that God has established for us that he wants us to attend, where he's giving us an invitation to be called out and to meet with him and to be welcomed by him. Pesach, Matzah B'Kodim, which Dod fulfilled. Shabuah, Teruah, which I will be fulfilling. Kippurim, which is the homecoming with Yahowah, so we can all, Sukkah, camp out with God as he returns the earth to the conditions found in Eden. That Kara is the basis of Mikra, which makes them invitations. But it is so interesting here that as he would have his two most prolific writers, and three all total, if you consider Moshe, who was surpassed in the amount that he wrote by Dod, who was the most prolific of all of those who have written as prophets for Yahowah. But I have written based upon what Yahowah has inspired through his translations, these translations of his text and insights and commentary on them, more than all of the prophets combined. There's a lot to read, a lot to recite. It's a lot to learn and to know and to understand. And well, today, reading and listening have about equal value. I think there was a time where reading was vastly superior to listening because it was much harder to validate what you were hearing and much easier to validate what you're reading because you can copy and paste it into a search engine and verify whether or not it's true. Today, you can even put it into artificial intelligence engines, chat GPT, and find verification that yes, that is accurate. But today, there is so much passion that can be conveyed through a blog like this, where we turn on the cameras, it's a live stream, and I speak directly to you. There's a genuineness and a passion and a confidence that is conveyed in these kind of circumstances. So I think both are important. But for Yahowah to create a word that is descriptive of his 7 annual meetings, the core of his schedule with us, his calendar through the years, that also incorporates reading, where the 3 individuals that I spoke of are the 3 most prolific writers along the way. And that we would ultimately recite all of this to you as part of the Yahowah blog, doing so 3,000 years ago, long before that was possible. I think that's powerful. It's interesting. Obviously prophetic. Further, its lama'an, its purpose would be to serve as a witness, teaching the truth to all who would listen, conveying the message to Kol Am Ha'eretz, the family of the land and the people of the earth. In the previous statement, the Nakri's lama'an primary purpose was to reacquaint, Yisrael with Yahowah's name. And now it is in this statement to direct their attention to the Kara invitations that Yahowah is providing and that Yada is reciting on behalf of God's people. These are the Moed Mikra. Further, it is now expressly evident that God is not only equating the Nakri, his observant foreigner, with Yada, one who knows. He is directing Yisrael's attention to him so that they Yada recognize and acknowledge him, so that they benefit from the answers he is providing pursuant to the Shem name and the purpose of the Moed Mikra and the timing as events play out over these next 8.5 years. Developing a profound Yareh respect and appreciation for all Yahowah represents, including his Shem, is the first step towards reconciliation. And in speaking of titles serving as names, in this introduction to the Nakri, Solomon equated him with a Zeroah. If you listened last night, you heard that very clearly. And there's only 3 Zeroah. Moshe says, or Yashayah says Moshe was a Zeroah. Yahowah says that Dod is a Zeroah. And both Yahowah and Yashayah designate myself as the final Zeroah. And in that final role, I'm the one cultivating the seeds that they have sown to produce productive harvests on Shabuah and Towrah. And now Solomon is associating this Nachri with Yada, bringing it all together. He is Yada, he is the Zeroah. He is the observant foreigner. He is the witness. He is the teacher. He's the one whose voice comes out of the sky, whom you can listen to and should act upon. And therefore, Nachri, Zeroah, and Yada are one. Now, it's also telling, but also prophetically accurate, that my message, even before I recognized that I was the Nachri and the Zeroah, was directed towards everyone on earth. I was prioritizing Yisrael, who's migrating, those migrating individuals who have struggled and wrestled with the Almighty, and trying to evolve them into those who engage in endure with God during this whole process. But I was initially fairly broad-based. My goal was to speak to anyone who would listen. I was going to talk about what God had to say to his people and through his people. But the fact of the matter is, if you asked me to participate on a radio program and that audience had 1% Jews or 99% Jews, I was going to go there and do it. And I did. That's not the case now. Now my focus is on God's people. I serve Yisrael. And I do so because there is no time left to be broad-based. You can't use the shotgun anymore. This is 8.5 years left. We're a year from the time of Yaakov's troubles. Israel's about to be dissected and attacked by Muslims again. It is either you stand up for Israel now and you focus on awakening God's people and returning them to Yahweh's name, or there is no tomorrow. And so you need to know I'm now devoted entirely to Yisrael. If you are a Goy and you listen, wonderful. There are a lot of wonderful Goyim who are part of the covenant and who are going to continue to join the covenant. And as this prophecy says, glad to have you. But understand that you're joining a family that is rooted in and devoted to Yisrael and Yehudim. That's not appealing to you. This family is not for you. Now, of course, even more revealing, since I had invested more time translating the Torah and Nabi than the writings up to this point, still writing anonymously under the nom de plume of Yada, I would not have noticed this prophecy regarding the Nachri had it not been for Zeroah. It's Zeroah that brought me here. At the time, I was trying to expand my understanding of how profoundly important the word Zeroah is, all that it represents as a title, and the realization that through the Torah, Zeroah is used to describe the sacrificial lamb. So it's directed towards the fulfillment of Passover. And therefore it applies, of course, to Dod once you realize that Dod is the Passover lamb. But it's also applied by Yashayah to Moshe. And here to me. It's a number of other places as well. And obviously, I'm not a sacrificial lamb. I'm presented as a bull. I'm sacrificed, but not as a lamb. And when you read it in Yashayah 17, as we did this morning down in the Rainbow Studio, you quickly realize that the reason for the reference to the Zeroah and Yashayah 17 is he is the one cultivating those two harvests that Yashayah spoke of, which are Shabuah and Towrah. He is the one cultivating the seeds to have a productive harvest. And so I was looking for the full breadth of the meaning of the word, which is from the Hebrew root, the actionable root, zerah. Zerah is one who sows seeds. It is to cultivate seeds. It is to work such that the seeds take root and grow and produce a productive harvest. And so as I was searching, and I decided this is such an important word, I'm going to study every single use of Zeroah. And oh my God, I came to two that were just flat out amazing. This is one of the two. And I realized, well, I've been brought to this because I am this. And then the next one that I studied after this is Yeshaya 53, that profound prophecy that speaks of us going astray and that our guilt was laid on the Lamb of God, Passover lamb, Dode, where he carried it off into Sheol to deposit it there and never to be seen again. Well, that narrative, that profoundly important prophetic narrative that describes the purpose of the fulfillment of Passover, it's introduced by asking the reader to first come to understand the identity of the Zeroah. And that only once you understand the identity of the Zeroah will you be in a position to understand the prophecy that follows. No one ever spoke of an individual being a Zeroah prior to this study of Yahweh's testimony in Yada Yahowah. And so it was Zeroah that brought me here. Just as I was trying to understand the use of this word. Now, that's one of the reasons that I have found it interesting that Solomon doubled down on his depiction of Yada, because it was at this time that I had to recognize that Yada is the name that I have chosen for this work, and I appreciate when Yahweh references it, but the fact is that he is also using Zeroah and Nachri and Choter and Bashar to describe the mission that we will be fulfilling. And so Yada is one who knows, who understands, who acknowledges, who is familiar with. And just as he did with the title Nachri, the observant and responsive foreigner, in addition to Lama'an, the prioritizing witness, God reemphasizes the importance of Yahweh's his Shem through him, that he is reintroducing his name to his people through Yada, through the Nachri, through the Lama'an. And he's inviting you to respond to this kara, this invitation, and use it to read or to listen to what is being recited. Because the 35 books at Yada Yah are presented at yadayah.com. They are all free. And there are hundreds now of episodes of the YAHOWAH blog on Facebook, YouTube, X, and they all serve as a fulfillment of this prophecy. And so you can capitalize upon it. And you now see a very specific fulfillment of God's declaration. It's here. It's being offered by Yada, the Nachri, God's Zeroah, and nowhere else. Of course, it is further affirming that the focus of Yada Yahowah has been on the Be'ah, the family of God. I was the first to deduce the covenant's 5 conditions and benefits, and to equate the Bereth, this covenant, with the Mikre, the invitations to be called out and meet God. I'm not bragging here. I'm just telling you what is true so that you can capitalize upon it, so that you know how unique this situation is, because we have very little time left and you need to capitalize on what I'm saying to you. Of course, all this was made possible by the other word that has appeared numerous times in this prophecy, and that is Asher. It is the path which reveals the benefits of the relationship. Asher is the first Hebrew word I translated 24 years ago, and it has led to everything that has followed. And it was Asher in 2 Samuel 7 that began it all, the greatest of all prophecies. That's what's brought us here to this understanding. And it's, of course, why Asher appears 3 times in this prophetic statement, introducing the Nakri, who is Yada, the Zeroah, serving as a Lama'an, so that Yisrael would know Yahweh Shem. I thank you for listening. I wish you a wonderful evening, and we'll be back together again tomorrow. This has been a special edition of the YAHOWAH blog, and I am your host, Yada, the Nakri, and Zeroah, Craig Winn.